Hello, lovelies, and I hope you're having a lovely day wherever you are. I also hope you're staying safe and sane because things are still crazy, and if you're working, I'm sure it's crazy. If you're staying at home, I'm sure you're sick of it. So I just hope that wherever you are, that you're doing okay. Hang in there. So for those of you who are new here, my name is Belinda. I am a sonographer or an ultrasound tech. Have been for the past 4 years. Recently started as a traveling sonographer until the COVID-19 pandemic caused my contract to get canceled. So I'm now quarantining at home, making YouTube videos. So thanks for tuning into this one. So I'm really excited about this video because I'm starting a new series on this channel that I'm calling Sono Sundays, alliteration. And I really want it to be a resource for current sonography students, maybe potential sonography students if it's something that you're considering, or you're looking for a new career path. So I've got something today for the current sonography students, and I'm calling it my top 5 tips for surviving your sonography program. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start it. Tip number 1, organize yo shit. Remember back in grade school, there was always that one kid who would just shove papers into their backpack, no folder, no notebook, everything just shoved in there, helter-skelter, everything a wrinkly, tattered mess. Don't be that kid. But seriously, there's a lot of different information that you're covering in your sonography program. Not only do you have your lectures specific to the ultrasound classes that you're taking, you also have your scan labs. Maybe you're also doing clinicals, a medical ethics class, and then you have different general education credits that might be required for your program. Anatomy and physiology, pathophysiology. I mean, there's a lot of classes that you're keeping track of, and it's going to be really helpful if you can find some sort of way to organize everything that's going to work best for you. So whether it's folders for each class, one big divided notebook, maybe a small notebook for each class, one big binder with divisions, a separate binder, whatever it is that works to keep all your paperwork, assignments, and everything straight. Do that. It'll really help you in the long run. One specific tip that I have to that is using some sort of planner. And I like to get one that has the months, the full months like that, as well as, your week broken down by day. And the reason that I like that is because at the beginning of the semester, I would take all the syllabuses for each class, and I would copy dates for exams and when assignments are due, if there's a paper or if there's like a group project that you need to be aware of the due dates for, I would write all that down. And then that way you have like your whole month at a glance, and you can see the way that your schedule is laid out, like knowing do you have 2 exams to study for in this particular week along with a project. It becomes easier to prioritize your time as far as studying and things like that. So tip number 2 is developing good study habits. So whether you have just graduated from high school and are starting your sonography program, or maybe you're a little bit older in life, you worked in a different career for a few years and now you're going back to school, or maybe you went to college and then now you're switching, you can come to sonography from all different types of avenues, but at some point you've probably heard someone mention study habits. And so it really becomes important in the sonography program because, like I said, you've got a lot of information being thrown at you, not just from different types of classes, but just even within your lecture for whether it's abdomen or OB-GYN or vascular or cardiac. There's a lot of information just within those classes. I don't want to say that it's hard to do, but it is daunting and it is challenging. Cats. And so it can feel like a lot, and you really need to, You really need to prioritize your time. You need to study in a way that works best for you. And so what that means is that there's different learning styles. And I'll provide some links in the description box below for where you can kind of take some tests that will tell you a little bit about your learning style. And study styles are so specific that I can't really provide any specific tips for you. You're just gonna have to try different things and see which works best for you, and try to think of like the ways that you retain information best. Like for example, I find that if I read something, I will just get in a habit of just reading the lines and I'm not really retaining it. But if I read to myself, if I reason through things with myself as I'm reading it, it becomes locked in a lot better. So I guess I'm kind of a combination of an auditory learner as well as a visual learner. There was a girl in my class who took beautiful notes, and she would draw these little diagrams, and she would, write these little, extra tidbits for her, just kind of help her retain that information. So if you are an excellent note taker, do that. If you prefer to type up your notes on a laptop, do that. If you want to record your lecture and listen to it repeatedly to help you retain that information, do that. Just find whatever way works best for you and apply that. There was a project in our class where we had to make charts for ovarian pathology, and my classmates and I liked it so much that we ended up doing it for most of our other classes anytime we were talking about pathology of a specific organ. So you can make it like this. I know it's backwards because of the type of camera that I'm using, but that way you've got what it looks like sonographically and all the other information that you need to know about it. So there's a couple different examples there. I find that that's helpful for keeping everything organized because, like I said, there's like, I don't even know how many different types of ovarian cysts and masses and tumors. Same thing for the liver and other organs. So that was something that was very helpful for retaining the features of each specific type of pathology. Tip number 3. Learn how to be a good test taker. I know each program is going to be a little bit different as to how the tests are written, who wrote the tests. In my program, all of our tests were written by pretty much just one instructor. So you can get a feel for the types of questions that the instructor is going to ask and use that to your advantage. Like usually after you take the first test of your first semester, you kind of get a feel for the types of information that you're going to need to know, and then the ways that they ask those questions. Because something that is, I think maybe it's not unique to healthcare, but it feels like it is that you use a lot more critical thinking. It's a different way of taking a test. So for example, in any multiple choice question, there might be like 2 kind of right answers, maybe 3, depending on, how it's asked and the options that you're presented. But what we're looking for is something that is the most correct. And it's easy when you see options that you're like, well, that also makes sense. Like, I think there's 2 of them. It's really easy to kind of talk yourself into a tizzy, and then you don't really know what the correct answer is. So it's a different way of test taking. So some of my suggestions or strategies for how to take a test, what I would do is on our test there would be a portion of questions that were specific to images, and we would usually start with that. So an image would be up on the screen for a certain amount of time, and then once you've circled your answer for that, I would then flip forward to another page on the test and go ahead and mark the answers for the ones that I knew right off the bat. Because there are going to be, if you've studied like you're supposed to with those good study habits, there are going to be some that just without even thinking. Whenever they move on to the next image question, then you go back. And I felt like that was a good way to kind of save some time. And that's just a general strategy for the rest of the test also, is go ahead and mark the ones that you know right off the bat, and then save the rest of your test taking time for the ones that require a little bit more thought processing or process of elimination. And this is something that you can also do when you're taking the actual registries. They're done on a computer, and you can flag questions and go back to them once you reach the end of the test. So, so that is something that I always recommend, is don't waste time on the things that you know. Go ahead and get those out of the way, and then spend the rest of your test time on the things that require a little bit more recall. Another thing is that you can let the test help you. Sometimes there are questions further down in the test booklet that are sort of related to questions that you're having trouble remembering, or you'll see something that'll jog your memory or help you recall something else that'll help you figure out that problem. Now, for my test anxiety people, I know that is a very real thing, and the only suggestions that I have for helping with that is what I said earlier about being able to talk yourself into thinking that 2 answers are correct. I always say go with your gut first, whichever one you look at and thought, oh, well, it's, yeah, definitely this. And then you're reading the rest of the answers, and then you got yourself into that cycle of, well, now I'm not sure if it's A or B. You can also just make sure that you're reading the question correctly. The test is not trying to trick you. Your instructor does not want to trick you. You just might need to pay attention to the wording, the verbiage that is used. And if you have any questions, you can always raise your hand during a test and ask your instructor. Unfortunately, you can't really do that once it comes to the registries. You're on your own. But those would be questions to flag and come back to later. But always just read the question as it's written, and then read your answers and reason through it that way. Don't let yourself get into this back and forth of, well, maybe it means this as well. It probably doesn't mean that as well. It probably reads it the way you read it the first time. Stop it! And tip number 4, this one is more specific to your clinical experience, but also in your scan lab. And I know each program is different as far as when you start your clinicals or when you start taking scan lab. But this is pretty general so that you can apply it whenever you do end up taking those classes. Approach every day as an opportunity to learn and accept that you will not have all the answers. And if you're anything like me, this one will be particularly challenging. Probably the biggest advantage to being a student in a clinical situation is that no one expects you to know what you're doing all of the time. And take advantage of that, because once you get into your career and you're working, once you've got several months under your belt, it's expected that you know what you're doing. And so clinical is, it's just really where you get to build up those skills that you've been learning in class or learning in scan lab, and to also learn new techniques. Like, for example, I had never seen a sonographer scan the liver through the ribs until I got to clinicals. Our instructor just never taught us that approach. And so that was something that was really helpful. When I went through my OB rotation doing pregnancies, and trying to get all the different views of the heart, the LVOT and the RVOT, the 3-vessel view and all those things, that I really learned how to go from one to the other in clinical. Like, it's not just book learning, it's a skill you have to be able to do. And that skill is going to take time to develop. You don't just automatically know how you need to move your hand to get to the image that you want. That takes practice and it takes muscle memory. So if it doesn't come to you right away from day one, your first clinical rotation, it's supposed to be that way. And even if it takes a couple clinical rotations, even if it takes you until right before you graduate for it to finally come naturally, it will. So just have that patience. Setbacks are normal. We all have days where we feel like the worst scanner ever. Even now, 4 years into this, sometimes you just have those patients that really challenge you and make you feel like you have no idea what you're doing. Why are you even bothering? That's normal. It will continue to happen. So just remember that when you don't know what you're doing, that means that you're learning. So just pay attention to your preceptor, the other sonographers that you are scanning with at whatever site you happen to be at, whether it's a hospital or a doctor's office. Ask questions. If they're giving you an opportunity to scan and you don't know what you're doing, you just ask, like, well, how did you get that view that you had earlier? Because I'm having trouble finding it myself. They are there to help you. So don't feel bad if you don't know what you're doing. And my 5th and final tip to surviving your sonography program is probably the most important thing. Rely on your classmates. I cannot stress how important this is, because you are going through trial by fire together. It is a very challenging couple of years, and you're gonna need your classmates to help you through it, to help you survive it. If only just because they're the only people who understand what it is that you're going through. As you as you start the program and as you go through it, maybe you have, you know, family that are helping you through it, that are supporting you while you're going back to school. And that's great, but you really need people who know exactly what the day-to-day is like, know exactly how much information you're having to study and retain, and all these different projects. Just for the venting factor, just being able to talk about how stressed you are, talk about how much is going on, because our lives don't stop while we're in school. Most of my classmates had kids, some were divorced and some were married. And they were dealing with all those things while we were going through the program, and I have no idea how they managed to do that. I think us being there for each other had a hand in that, but also the ability to support each other in your classes. Like, for example, study groups. We did that a couple times, and sometimes that is a good way to kind of get everyone together and pull your knowledge. You know, like, hey, I'm really struggling with this concept here. Do any of you have a better way of explaining it that would make sense to me? Those charts that I talked about, like I said, it was part of a project that was assigned for one class, but we continued it for the rest of the year. So what we did is we would split it up by section, and then once we'd finished our part, we would send it to everybody. So that way no one person had to, you know, make like 5 charts for one test, and that way everyone got to benefit from everyone's collective work. I truly believe that the reason that I loved my sonography program so much was not only did I find a love of doing ultrasound itself, but I formed such strong bonds with the people that I was in class with. And in fact, I think there are 5 of us. We get together, right now it's like once a year. We always say it's gonna be more often, but you know, life happens, and right now we can't get together anyway. But we still keep in touch, you know, we stay active in each other's lives. We get together for lunch or dinner or something whenever we can. We've just all become really good friends, and I'm so glad that I got to share this experience with them, crazy as it was. So yeah, that's it. Those are my survival tips for you. I hope you found this video helpful. Feel free to share this video with a sonography student in your life if you are not yourself a student. Like I said, this will be a regular series that I'm going to start doing every Sunday. So if you have a question, if you have a particular topic that you would like to hear me talk about, please leave that in the comments below. You can also reach me on Instagram. I'll have that information at the end of the video. So make sure that you subscribe so that way you can find them easily, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. So that's it. Take care. Have a great day. See you in the next video.